We have a number of programs that you talked about there. We've got Social Security, we've got Medicare, we've got Medicaid. Love to get your thoughts on each of these. So maybe let's start with Social Security. I always say that it's going broke, but it will never go broke. That's one of the statements I use all the time. Not sure how you feel about the program. Obviously, we know it's got the challenges, but any thoughts on fixes, what they could do to get this to where we do have more stability, and what happens if they don't fix it?
Yeah, the nature of the fixes are easy enough such that I don't typically tell people that you're not going to expect Social Security. Generally, if you move back the Social Security age, to 70, it sort of solves the problem. A lot of people don't like that because life expectancy being what it is, it means you're going to be putting a lot of money in and not drawing a lot of money out. Because if you start at 70 and maybe you die at 77, then you paid in for 40 years, but you only drew out for 7 years, right? So that's not going to be a very popular solution. Susie Orman is telling people fairly consistently we should move the retirement age to age 70. I'm not saying I'm a fan of that. I'm saying that that's one of the things that's being thrown out there. And there is this, the Social Security age back when it first came out in 1935 was 65. And here we are, 100 years later, and it's even earlier. You can now draw Social Security at 62. Well, Dave, what's happened to life expectancy over that time period? Well, it's gotten a lot longer. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we could push that age back, particularly given the fact that come 2034 or so, there's going to be an across-the-board cut of, something on the order of 22%. Every single recipient is going to have to take a 22% across-the-board reduction in their Social Security payments. And this is going to hit particularly hard for people that don't have a lot of other assets or sources of income.
I know another friend of yours, Larry Kotlikoff at Boston University, talked about increasing taxes as a way to solve the problem. And initially when he brought it out, I believe it was just over a 4% increase, 2% employer tax increase on the employee, 2% on the employer. What are your thoughts there? Do you see a day that those taxes are going to have to go up as part of that solution?
As with any of these tough decisions, I think it's going to be some combination of the two. It's going to be some combination of pushing back the retirement date and increasing revenue. And that I think is going to ultimately be the answer to a lot of these problems. Increasing revenue, reducing spending by pushing that retirement age out, or some combination too. So I think that Larry Kotlikoff, Dr. Kotlikoff is definitely on to something there. I think he's made sort of an accurate prescription as to what needs to be done. But I think it'll be a combination of those two.
And we're looking about 2020 or 2033, 2035 for the trust fund to be gone. Again, that's going to fluctuate between now and then. Those of you that are listening, as you look at it, 1 year the report comes out and it's a 2033, then it's a 2034, 2035. So we're still looking at a decade as we look at the ability to fix programs. That's time to be able to solve those problems. But as Dave says, as we push that can further down the road, the more issues we're going to have. Dave, you talked about Medicare. This is another interesting one to me. And as I look at the numbers, you mentioned how much faster the inflation's impacts having on that. This is another one I remember when I put my first slides together. About $285,000 is what we were expecting for healthcare costs for a retiree. And now the latest numbers that I saw were over $400,000 for a married couple to get through retirement, the various healthcare costs that they have. And obviously, Medicare plays a big part of that. We've already seen 2 tax increases on the program. We had the additional wage tax that got added for those who make over $200,000 or $250,000 for your married couple. You got that add in, and then you got the adjustment for the investment income tax. That's a Medicaid or Medicare tax as well. What are your thoughts with that program, where it's heading? It's such a critical part of our overall stability for elder care. What are your general thoughts of where we're at in the future with Medicare?
Well, Medicare is not going anywhere. I mean, you say that, some people think that Social Security could be going away, or certain swaths of the population could not be receiving Social Security somewhere down the road. You don't hear that as much about Medicare. Medicare is something that you just don't hear people talking about pushing the age back to 70 or whatever, or people not getting it at all. You just don't hear that as much about Medicare as you do Social Security. And that's sort of interesting because, like I said, Medicare is 5 times more expensive than Social Security. And when you look at that, Dr. Kotlikoff says it's as high as a $239 trillion underfunding. What does that mean? That means you'd have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today earning Treasury rates to be able to deliver on those 3 programs. Well, Medicare is the largest of those of the 3 programs. It constitutes the highest percentage of that $239 trillion underfunding. And so how are you going to fix that, right? People tell me all the time, Dave, you can't raise income taxes to solve the problem. Not under current law. You'd have to pay for it under FICA tax. That's what current law says. I actually emailed David Walker. I said, do you foresee a future in which they could raise income taxes to pay for that underfunding? And he says, yes, but you would have to change the law. And so people say, well, Dave, it would take an act of Congress to pull this off. And I say, yes, but as your country is slowly sliding into insolvency and fewer options are on the table, I see this as one way that they could raise the revenue to shore up Medicare and then Social Security and Medicaid by raising income taxes. You can't do that under current law, but I see that happening somewhere down the road.
Let's move over to Medicaid. That's an interesting topic because it's really a federal program that's in connection with states that run the program. But one of the big things that it's paying for now is the long-term care costs that the country is going through. And I know there are states like California, Washington, other states of that nature that are saying, we're concerned about the future viability of our program here because of all the long-term care needs the country has. Let's try to establish long-term care programs inside of our state, which from what I've seen, none of that's gone very far yet because there's so many complex issues to deal with, from just the cost to, hey, I'm living in California today and then I move to Utah or some other state. How does this all work when I get in those older years? Talk a little bit about Medicare and its future and what you see happening there as well.
Well, this goes back to the same demographic time bomb, which is that we have this unprecedented number of people, that's 78 million strong baby boomers that are moving out of the workforce onto the rolls of the entitlement program. They're living longer, but also the likelihood that they're going to end up needing long-term care is sky high. The number is between you and your spouse, there's a 70% likelihood that one of you are going to end up needing long-term care. And this is a pretty devastating thing because, what a lot of people do is they save hand over fist their entire life. They scrimp and they save and they scrimp and they save. And by the time they reach retirement, they've got this nest egg. And then somebody ends up needing long-term care and you go into spend down. And all of that money, one of the community spouse was planning on spending in retirement now gets earmarked for the long-term care facility. You get forced into spend down, and the community spouse gets to keep one house, one car, minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance of about $2,500 a month, and depending on the state, about $130,000 of cash. So what was shaping up to be a perfectly rosy retirement for a lot of people turns into basic bare bones subsistence type living for the community spouse. So this is a big deal. And people know that there's this unprecedented need that's looming off on the horizon. And unless states can wrap their arms around it right now and sort of anticipate this need, they know that the funding from the federal government at the state level is not going to be enough to pay for this tsunami of spending that's coming down the road due to the long-term care needs that they can actuarially anticipate. So it's another big, scary, intractable problem that will likely result in some combination of raising taxes or cutting spending.
And if you look at the long-term care issue, part of the challenge is right now we've only got about 10 companies left that offer long-term care insurance. So when you look back, and there used to be 150 plus companies that were offering these products, and a lot of people were getting in and trying to buy the products and use them for their retirement. Now, because it's so expensive, so few carriers, we're definitely seeing less and less people in a situation where they can afford that. So it's pushing them into the Medicaid, which means bigger and bigger problems from the government standpoint. And